Hello, and welcome to the Sleepy Island channel. Tonight, we're going on a gentle journey to one of the Caribbean's most beautiful treasures, the island of Saint Lucia. Over the next while, I'll share stories and whispers about this remarkable place, woven together like waves lapping softly on a shore. There's no need to remember everything, or anything at all, really. Just let the words wash over you, and allow yourself to drift wherever feels comfortable. So settle in, get comfortable, and let's begin our peaceful voyage to Saint Lucia. Imagine, if you will, a small teardrop of land floating in the eastern Caribbean Sea. Saint Lucia is just 238 square miles in size, small enough that you could drive around its perimeter in a few hours, yet vast enough to hold countless wonders within its shores. It sits there, cradled by the warm waters, between the islands of Martinique to the north and St. Vincent to the south. This tiny island rests at approximately 13 degrees north of the equator, where the sun shines generously and the trade winds blow gentle and constant. The Atlantic Ocean kisses its eastern shores with rhythmic persistence, while the calmer Caribbean Sea embraces its western coast. Between these two bodies of water, Saint Lucia exists in perfect balance. Long before it bore the name Saint Lucia, this island was home to the indigenous Arawak people, who called it Yuanalaro, which means Island of the Iguanas. Picture them, centuries ago, navigating their canoes along the same coastline, seeing the same mountains rising from the mist each morning. They lived peacefully here, fishing in the abundant waters, cultivating cassava in the fertile soil, and watching the same stars well overhead that we see today. The Arawaks were later followed by the Caribs, another indigenous people who called the island Hewanora, a name that still echoes today in the island's international airport. These early inhabitants understood something that visitors still discover. There's a particular magic to this place, a sense of being somewhere truly special. The island was officially named Saint Lucia by French settlers, likely after Saint Lucy of Syracuse, the Christian martyr. There's a gentle poetry to this naming, Saint Lucy, whose name means light, becoming the namesake of an island blessed with seemingly endless sunshine. Some say it was named on December 13th, the feast day of Saint Lucy, though the exact date has been softened by time into legend. What makes Saint Lucia particularly fascinating is its history of changing hands between European powers. The island changed ownership between the French and British 14 times. Yes, 14 times, earning it the rather whimsical nickname Helen of the West Indies. Like Helen of Troy, whose beauty sparked a legendary war, Saint Lucia's strategic position and natural harbor made it a prize worth fighting for, again and again. Each time control shifted, the island absorbed a little more culture, a little more language, a little more character from its new rulers. The French would claim it, build their settlements, plant their traditions deep in the soil. Then the British would arrive, and new layers would be added, new laws, new customs, new ways of speaking. Back and forth it went, like a gentle tide, until finally Saint Lucia gained its independence on February 22, 1979, becoming a sovereign nation within the Commonwealth. Today, English is the official language, a legacy of that final British period. But if you listen carefully in the villages and towns, you'll hear French Creole, or Creole as it's known locally, flowing through conversations like music. It's a beautiful reminder that history doesn't erase itself. It layers, it blends, it creates something entirely new. And through all these centuries of change, through all those flags raised and lowered, the island's two magnificent volcanic peaks, the Pitons, have stood unchanged, Gross Piton and Petit Piton, rising dramatically from the sea on the southwestern coast. These twin mountains, these ancient sentinels, have watched every ship that ever approached, witnessed every battle, and remained constant while everything else transformed around them. They rise steeply, Gross Piton reaching 2,619 feet and Petit Piton stretching to 2,461 feet. Their rainforest-covered slopes disappearing into morning mists, eternal and patient. And there, beneath those peaks, the story of Saint Lucia continues to unfold, generation after generation, wave after gentle wave. We'll continue our journey through Saint Lucia soon, discovering more about this peaceful island. But for now, just breathe and rest. Those remarkable pitons we just spoke of, they're so special, so extraordinary in their beauty, that in 2004, UNESCO declared them a World Heritage Site. Not just the peaks themselves, but the entire Pitons management area surrounding them. This recognition placed them among the world's most treasured natural landmarks, alongside places like the Grand Canyon and the Great Barrier Reef. A small Caribbean island, holding within it something the entire world agrees is worth protecting forever. The Pitons exist because of something remarkable happening deep beneath the surface. Saint Lucia is entirely volcanic in origin, born from the Earth's restless energy millions of years ago. The island rose from the sea floor through countless eruptions, layer upon layer of volcanic rock building upward until finally it broke through the surface of the ocean, reaching toward the sky. And while those ancient volcanoes have long since gone quiet, the earth beneath Saint Lucia still remembers. Near the town of Soufriere, on the southwestern coast where the Pitons stand guard, there's an extraordinary place. The Sulphur Springs is the world's only drive-in volcano, a collapsed volcanic crater where you can literally drive into what remains of an ancient magma chamber. Steam rises from the ground, bubbling pools of mud boil and churn, and the air carries the distinctive scent of sulfur. The earth here is hot beneath your feet, warm to the touch, as if the island is breathing slowly and steadily, reminding visitors that it's very much alive, just resting. This volcanic legacy blessed Saint Lucia with incredibly fertile soil, rich, dark earth that seems to make almost anything grow with enthusiasm. The island's hillsides cascade with vegetation, every shade of green imaginable, drinking in the tropical rain and Caribbean sunshine. Today, approximately 180,000 people call Saint Lucia home, scattered across the island's valleys and coasts, living in fishing villages and mountain communities, in bustling towns and quiet settlements where life moves to the rhythm of the seasons rather than the clock. Some families have been here for generations, their roots running as deep as the ancient trees. Others arrived more recently, but all share this small piece of paradise, this volcanic jewel in the Caribbean Sea. The heart of the island, its capital, rests on the northwest coast. Castres, named after a French minister of the Navy, is home to about a third of the island's population. The city curves around a natural harbor, one of those strategic deep-water ports that made Saint Lucia so valuable to European powers centuries ago. Today, it's a place where cruise ships dock, where markets buzz with activity in the morning, where the old and new exist side by side. Stone buildings from the colonial era stand near modern structures, and the streets carry the energy of island life, colorful, vibrant, yet somehow still maintaining that Caribbean ease. But perhaps Saint Lucia's most unexpected treasure isn't found in its landscape or its harbors. It's found in the realm of human achievement. Saint Lucia has produced 2 Nobel Prize laureates, an extraordinary accomplishment for an island nation of fewer than 200,000 people. Sir Arthur Lewis won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 1979, the very year of the island's independence, while Derek Walcott received the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1992. Imagine that, this small volcanic island, this speck in the Caribbean, producing 2 minds brilliant enough to earn humanity's highest honor. Their achievements speak to something special in the Saint Lucian spirit, a culture that values learning, creativity, and excellence. The island wears a lush green mantle, particularly in its interior. Nearly 77% of Saint Lucia is covered in tropical rainforest, clothing the volcanic peaks and filling the valleys with an almost impossible density of life. Tree ferns unfurl their ancient fronds in the understory. Towering gomia trees, the same trees the Caribs once carved into canoes, reach toward the canopy. Orchids cling to branches, and the air itself feels alive with moisture and growing things. In these forests, time seems to move differently, more slowly, as if the trees themselves are breathing in and breathing out in great, patient cycles. This rainforest exists because of the island's climate. Saint Lucia enjoys temperatures that hover between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, cooled by those gentle trade winds that never seem to stop. The island doesn't really have seasons in the way that northern places do. Instead, there's the drier period from December to May, and the wetter period from June to November. Though wetter is relative, even in the rainy season, the sun finds ways to break through, and the showers often come and go in quick, refreshing bursts that leave everything glistening and renewed. The rain feeds everything. It fills the mountain streams that tumble down toward the coast. It nourishes the forests. It waters the gardens where breadfruit trees spread their enormous leaves, where mango trees grow heavy with fruit, where banana plants stand in ordered rows on hillside plantations, their broad leaves rustling softly in the breeze. And through it all, the island continues its quiet existence, warm and green and peaceful, surrounded by the eternal Caribbean Sea, just being exactly as it has been for millions of years. Let yourself rest there, in that warmth, in that gentle green peace. We'll discover more of Saint Lucia's story soon. But for now, just breathe and drift. In those rainforests we just wandered through, high in the canopy where the sunlight filters down in golden shafts, there lives a creature found nowhere else on Earth. The Saint Lucia parrot, known locally as the Jacquot, exists only on this island, a bird so special, so uniquely Saint Lucian, that it appears on the nation's coat of arms. These parrots wear their feathers like living rainbows, emerald green bodies, brilliant blue faces, splashes of red on their throats and wings. Once, they nearly disappeared entirely, hunted and displaced until fewer than 100 remained. But the people of Saint Lucia said no. These birds belong here. They're part of who we are. Through careful conservation, the Jacquot population has recovered, and now their calls echo through the mountain forests once again, a sound that means home to those who know it. The island's volcanic soil and tropical climate don't just grow forests. They've made Saint Lucia an agricultural gem. For much of the 20th century, bananas were the island's primary export and economic lifeline, earning it the nickname Land of Many Waters for the rainfall that kept those banana plantations thriving. Picture hillside after hillside covered in banana plants, their huge leaves creating seas of green that rippled in the wind. Workers would harvest the heavy bunches in the early morning cool, and the fruit would make its way down winding mountain roads to waiting ships. Though tourism has grown to share the economic stage, you'll still see banana plantations throughout the island. Their presence a reminder of the Earth's generosity and the labor of generations. Where those volcanic mountains finally meet the sea, something magical happens. Saint Lucia is blessed with both golden sand beaches and dramatic black sand beaches, sometimes existing just miles apart. The black sand comes from volcanic rock, ground down over millennia by waves and weather into fine, dark grains that absorb the sun's warmth. These beaches, like Chastanaye near Soufrière, have a stark, almost otherworldly beauty. Black sand against turquoise water, palm trees leaning overhead. Meanwhile, on other parts of the coast, you'll find beaches of softer, paler sand, gentle and inviting, each beach its own small paradise. One bay in particular has captured imaginations for decades. Jacquot Bay, on the western coast, has been called the most beautiful bay in the Caribbean. High praise in a region full of stunning harbors. It's a deep, hurricane-safe inlet surrounded by steep, heavily forested hills that seem to embrace the water. Palm trees lean over the shoreline, their reflections perfect in the calm surface. The bay is so sheltered, so hidden, that British Admiral Samuel Barrington once concealed his entire fleet here in the 1700s by camouflaging his ships with palm fronds, tricking French ships that sailed right past without noticing. In more recent times, Hollywood discovered it. The original Dr. Dolittle film was shot here in 1967, and it's easy to see why. Some places just have that quality of feeling both real and dreamlike at once. The island's dual heritage, French and British, back and forth through those 14 changes of power, created something beautifully unique. Walk through the villages, and you'll see it everywhere. The architecture blends French Caribbean and British colonial styles. Wooden Creole houses with gingerbread trim painted in cheerful colors. Their wide verandas designed to catch every breeze. Their steep roofs built to shed tropical downpours. Stone churches stand with both Anglican restraint and Catholic grandeur. Even the food tells this story, French techniques meeting British traditions, with African and Caribbean influences woven throughout, creating a cuisine that belongs only to Saint Lucia. This rich cultural heritage is celebrated openly and joyfully. Every year in October, the island observes Jounan Creole Day, when St. Lucians proudly wear traditional dress, speak Creole throughout the day, prepare traditional foods, and celebrate the African, French, and Caribbean roots that make their culture unique. It's a day that says, we remember where we came from, all the different streams that flowed together to make us who we are. The streets fill with music, with the scent of cooking, with laughter and pride. It's heritage made visible, made joyful, made alive. On the northwestern tip of the island, connected to the mainland by a narrow causeway, lies a place where much of that history played out. Pigeon Island, now a national landmark, was once a military outpost used by both French and British forces to guard the approaches to the harbor at Castries. The ruins still stand, old fortifications, barracks, and gun batteries slowly being reclaimed by tropical vegetation. You can climb up to Fort Rodney at the highest point and look out over the same view that soldiers watched centuries ago, seeing what they saw. Endless blue water, the green coastline stretching south, and the daily miracle of sunset painting everything gold. It's now a peaceful place for picnics and history, but the stones remember when cannons roared across these waters. And speaking of those waters, Saint Lucia is surrounded by coral reefs teeming with marine life, underwater gardens where sea turtles glide gracefully, where rainbow-colored fish dart between coral formations, where seahorses hide in sea grass meadows, and octopi change color and shape against the reef. The warm Caribbean current brings nutrients and life, creating an underwater world just as rich and varied as the rainforests above. Divers and snorkelers drift through these aquatic landscapes, weightless and dreaming, while above the surface, pelicans plunge dive for fish and frigate birds soar on motionless wings. Near those sulfur springs we visited earlier, where the earth still breathes warmth from its volcanic heart, there's a place where that geothermal energy creates something truly magical. The Diamond Falls Botanical Gardens is home to a waterfall whose waters flow through mineral-rich volcanic rock, painting the cliff face in shades of yellow, purple, green, and orange, a natural canvas that shifts and changes depending on the minerals present in the water at any given time. The French attempted to harness these mineral waters in the 1700s, building baths for their troops, believing the waters held healing properties. Today, visitors can still soak in warm mineral baths fed by these same springs, letting the Earth's ancient warmth seep into tired muscles while surrounded by tropical gardens where hibiscus blooms and hummingbirds hover, their wings beating so fast they become almost invisible, just a gentle hum in the air. The island is compact, intimate in its geography. At its widest point, Saint Lucia measures only 14 miles across, and it stretches just 27 miles from north to south. Dimensions that make it feel knowable, graspable, like something you could hold in your mind all at once. And yet within this small compass, the island contains such variety. Mountains and valleys, rainforest and coastline, fishing villages and market towns, each with its own character, its own pace. You could wake up in a coastal village, breakfast to the sound of waves, drive an hour inland through winding mountain roads, and find yourself in cool forest mist by lunchtime, the sea invisible beyond the green. This smallness is part of the island's charm. Everything is close, nothing is too far, and yet there's always something new to discover around the next curve in the road. The volcanic soil that grows those banana plantations so well has another treasure to share. Saint Lucia produces some of the Caribbean's finest cocoa, grown on small estates throughout the island where cacao trees flourish in the dappled shade of taller trees, their pods hanging directly from trunk and branches in shades of yellow, red, and purple. The Rabot estate, near Soufrière, has transformed this tradition into something special, a tree-to-bar chocolate experience where you can see the entire journey. Cacao pods harvested by hand, beans fermented in wooden boxes, dried in the sun, roasted until the air fills with that unmistakable chocolate aroma, then ground and refined into bars of dark, rich chocolate that tastes of this specific soil, this specific island. Each bar carries within it the memory of rain and sun and volcanic earth. That town we keep returning to, Soufrière, holds a special place in Saint Lucian history. Soufrière was actually the original capital of Saint Lucia, founded by the French in 1746, long before Castries took that role. The town sits in the shadow of the Pitons, its streets sloping down toward the sea, its buildings weathered by centuries of salt air and tropical rain. It's quieter now than it was in its capital days, more peaceful, a place where fishermen still bring their catch in each morning and life moves to older rhythms. The name itself means sulfur in the air in French, a reference to those volcanic springs that have always defined this part of the island. Walking through Soufrière feels like stepping back in time, not to any specific year, but to a pace of living that measures days by sunrise and sunset rather than by clocks. When it comes to food, Saint Lucia has declared its allegiance clearly. The national dish is green figs and saltfish, though figs here means green bananas, boiled until tender and served alongside salted cod that's been soaked overnight to remove the salt, then sautéed with onions, peppers, and tomatoes. It's a dish born of necessity and geography. Salt cod was cheap, stable protein that could survive the journey from colder waters, while green bananas grew abundantly on every hillside. But necessity became tradition, and tradition became love. Families make it on Sunday mornings, the smell filling their kitchens with comfort and memory. It's simple food, humble ingredients transformed through care and history into something that means home. The island pulses with music and celebration throughout the year. Saint Lucia Carnival, held in July, transforms the island into 2 days of vibrant costumes, calypso competitions, and revelry that spills through the streets from dawn until long after dark. Unlike many Caribbean islands that hold Carnival before Lent, Saint Lucia moved its celebration to summer, creating a uniquely timed festival. Bands of masqueraders in elaborate costumes covered in feathers, beads, and sequins dance through the streets. Sound systems blast soca music, and the entire island seems to move as one. Then there's the Saint Lucia Jazz Festival, which for decades brought world-class musicians to perform against backdrops of sunset beaches and historic sites. Music isn't just entertainment here, it's woven into the fabric of life, a constant presence like the sound of the sea. Despite its tropical location, Saint Lucia has been remarkably fortunate when it comes to hurricanes, sitting just far enough south that many major storms pass to the north. The island does fall within the hurricane belt, and storms have struck: Hurricane Allen in 1980, Hurricane Thomas in 2010. But compared to islands further north, Saint Lucia has been spared the worst and most frequent impacts. Still, the people here respect the hurricane season from June to November, watching the weather, preparing, remembering. They've built their homes with strong foundations and hurricane shutters, learned to read the sky and feel changes in the wind. It's part of island life, this awareness of living in conversation with weather and sea, this understanding that nature is both generous and powerful. In those warm waters surrounding the island, something hopeful is happening beneath the surface. Saint Lucia has become a leader in coral reef restoration, with marine biologists and local volunteers carefully growing coral fragments in underwater nurseries before transplanting them to damaged reefs. These coral gardeners, as they're sometimes called, work slowly and patiently, because corals grow slowly, adding just inches per year, rebuilding the underwater forests that fish depend on, that protect coastlines from storms, that hold entire ecosystems together. It's delicate work, done with hope and dedication, planting gardens that may not reach their full glory for decades, gifts to a future they may never see. The young corals sway gently in the current, tiny but alive, growing in their own quiet time. On the roads above these waters, you'll notice something that might feel curious if you're from certain parts of the world. Like many former British colonies, Saint Lucia drives on the left side of the road, a legacy that remains long after independence, woven into daily life. The winding coastal roads and steep mountain passes seem designed for slow, careful driving anyway, inviting you to take your time, to notice the views around each bend. The sea appearing suddenly through a gap in the trees, a village tucked into a valley below, a roadside vendor selling fresh fruit under a makeshift shelter. Honking isn't aggressive here, it's communication, greeting, a way of saying I see you, I'm here. The roads themselves become part of the island's gentle rhythm. Every Friday night in the northern fishing village of Grosse Islet, something magical transforms the quiet streets. The Grosse Islet Friday Night Street Party, known locally as Jump Up, turns the village into an open-air celebration where locals and visitors alike spill into the streets to dance, eat grilled fish and chicken fresh off the barbecue, and let the music wash over them. Steel drums compete with sound systems playing soca and reggae. Children weave through the crowd selling homemade sweets, and the air fills with laughter, cooking smoke, and joy. It's been happening for decades, this weekly ritual, a space where work week melts into weekend, where community comes together not for any special occasion but simply because, why not? Why not dance? Why not celebrate being alive on a Friday night under Caribbean stars? Throughout the island's interior, water is always moving, always flowing downward from those rain-soaked peaks toward the sea. Saint Lucia has numerous waterfalls tucked into its valleys and forests, each with its own character. Terrail Falls, near Soufriere, drops 30 feet into a pool surrounded by tropical gardens, the water cool and clear, safe for swimming. The falls create a constant, soothing sound, that white noise of falling water that makes everything else seem quiet by comparison. People stand beneath the cascade, letting it pound gently on their shoulders. A natural massage that's been there for thousands of years will be there for thousands more. Other falls hide deeper in the forest, requiring hikes through thick vegetation, rewarding those who seek them with moments of pure, undiscovered beauty, just you and the falling water and the green silence of the forest. Hollywood has noticed Saint Lucia's beauty too. The island served as a filming location for Superman 2 in the 1980s, with the dramatic Pitons standing in for an alien landscape. Other productions followed over the years, drawn by those same qualities that draw everyone. The dramatic scenery, the quality of light, the way the island can look both familiar and otherworldly depending on the angle. But for every film crew that comes and goes, the island remains itself. The locations return to being just places where people live, where fishermen cast their nets, where children walk to school, briefly famous, then quietly local again. Beneath Soufriere, beneath those sulfur springs and mineral waterfalls, there lies tremendous potential. Saint Lucia sits atop significant geothermal energy reserves, heat trapped in the earth that could, with proper development, power much of the island with clean, renewable energy. Studies have been conducted, wells have been drilled to test the resource, and dreams have been dreamed of an island powered by its own volcanic heart. Progress has been slow. These projects require massive investment, careful planning, international cooperation. But the heat is there, constant and patient, waiting. Perhaps one day the island will harness what has always been beneath it, completing a circle. The volcanoes that created the land now powering the lives lived upon it. Around the entire coastline, in villages whose names roll off the tongue like poetry, Anslare, Canaries, Choiseul, Laborie, Views Fort, fishing remains not just an industry but a way of life passed down through generations. Wooden fishing boats painted in bright blues, yellows, and greens rest on beaches between voyages. Before dawn, fishermen head out into the darkness, reading the water by feel and experience, knowing where the fish gather, where the currents run. They return with the morning light, their catches of mahi-mahi, tuna, and snapper drawing small crowds of buyers. In Anslare, there's a Friday night fish fry where the day's catch goes straight from boat to grill to plate. As fresh as fish can be, seasoned with island spices and served with sides of provisions, yams, breadfruit, dasheen, all grown in the earth nearby. The tradition continues, fathers teaching sons and daughters, the knowledge of the sea passing from hand to hand, from generation to generation, like an inheritance made of skill and patience. And once a year, on a specific date marked on every calendar, the entire island pauses to remember and celebrate. February 22nd is Independence Day in Saint Lucia, the anniversary of that moment in 1979 when the British flag was lowered for the last time and Saint Lucia's own flag, with its blue field representing the sea and sky, the triangles representing the Pitons, and the gold, black, and white symbolizing sunshine, culture, and unity, was raised. Schools close, government offices shut their doors, and people gather for parades, cultural performances, and celebrations that honor both the journey to independence and the nation they've built since. It's a day of pride, yes, but also of reflection, on how far they've come, on the work still ahead, on what it means to be Saint Lucian in this particular moment of history. The island turns in its slow circle through the seasons, through its celebrations and quiet days, through work and rest. The sun rising over the Atlantic, setting into the Caribbean, always the same, always slightly different, warm, peaceful, home. Breathe with the island, in and out, like waves, like the wind through palm fronds, gentle, endless, will continue soon. But for now, simply rest. If you were to reach into your pocket in Saint Lucia, the coins and bills you'd find there tell their own quiet story. The island uses the Eastern Caribbean dollar as its currency, a currency shared with 7 other island nations in this part of the Caribbean: Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, Montserrat, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Anguilla. It's a practical arrangement, a recognition that these small islands, scattered like emeralds across the sea, have more in common with each other than they have differences. The bills feature images of local life, fishing boats, markets, the natural beauty that defines the region. Money as memory, as shared identity, as connection between neighbors separated by water but joined by history and culture. In the heart of Castries, there exists a place that awakens all the senses at once. The Castries Central Market, especially vibrant on Saturday mornings, is where farmers from across the island bring their produce. Mountains of bananas still attached to their stalks, breadfruit the size of soccer balls, Christophine and dasheen, mangoes and soursop, fresh nutmeg and cinnamon sticks, hot peppers in every color from green to deep red. Women in headscarves sit beside their displays, calling out greetings, offering tastes, sharing recipes. The air is thick with competing scents: ripe fruit, fresh fish on ice, bouquets of tropical flowers, ground spices. It's chaos and order at once, voices overlapping in English and Creole, laughter and negotiation. The most ancient form of commerce. People gathering to share what they've grown, what they've caught, what they've made with their hands. The market has stood in various forms for over a century, and in its essence, it probably hasn't changed much. Just this same exchange, this same energy, this same celebration of abundance. High above Castries, overlooking the harbor from its commanding height, stands a hill that has witnessed centuries of conflict and peace. Morn Fortune, which translates to Hill of Good Luck, has been a military fortification since the 1700s and changed hands multiple times between the French and British. You can still walk among the old military buildings, many now repurposed. Some house Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, educating a new generation where soldiers once drilled. The view from the top stretches across the entire harbor, out to sea, down the coastline, the same strategic vantage point that made it so valuable to those competing powers. But where cannons once stood ready, now there are only quiet spots to sit and watch the cruise ships come and go. Pelicans diving for fish, the sun making diamonds on the water. History softened by time into something beautiful and peaceful. Though many religions are practiced on the island, Saint Lucia remains predominantly Roman Catholic, a heritage from those long periods of French control. Sunday mornings, church bells ring out from villages across the island. Gothic stone churches in towns, smaller wooden chapels in remote valleys, their sounds carrying on the wind. The Catholic faith here has absorbed elements of African traditions and island culture, creating something uniquely Saint Lucian. Churches fill with families dressed in their Sunday finest. Hymns sung in English and Creole, the rituals both ancient and local. Saints' feast days are celebrated not just with Mass but with processions, music, food, faith woven into the fabric of community life, inseparable from being Saint Lucian. That Creole language we keep hearing woven through conversations, it's more than just a linguistic curiosity. While English is the official language, approximately 95% of Saint Lucians speak Creole as their first or home language, switching fluidly between it and English depending on context. Creole is a French-based Creole, but calling it broken French would miss its poetry, its logic, its beauty. It's a complete language that developed when enslaved Africans, French settlers, and indigenous peoples needed to communicate, blending French vocabulary with African grammatical structures and indigenous words, creating something entirely new. To hear it spoken rapidly is to hear music, the rhythm, the expressiveness, the way it can convey with one phrase what might take 3 sentences in English. It's the language of home, of emotion, of humor. Many Saint Lucians will tell you that some things simply can't be said properly in English. They need Creole to capture the exact feeling, the precise meaning. Language as cultural identity, as resistance to erasure, as celebration of who they are. Off the southeastern coast, there are 2 tiny islets barely visible from the mainland, accessible only by boat and heavily restricted. The Maria Islands Nature Reserve is home to some of the rarest reptiles on Earth, including the Saint Lucian ground lizard, the Maria Islands ground lizard, and colorful Zandali T ground lizards found nowhere else. These tiny islands, just 25 acres combined, are all that's left of habitat that once covered more of Saint Lucia before mongooses, rats, and other invasive species arrived. The islets are closely guarded, only researchers and small, escorted groups are allowed to visit, and even then, only during certain times of year to avoid disturbing nesting seabirds. It's conservation at its most careful, most intentional. These small patches of rock and scrub in the sea hold creatures that represent millions of years of isolated evolution, and Saint Lucia has chosen to protect them, to say, these small lives matter, this diversity is worth preserving, even when it's difficult, even when it costs money and effort. Saint Lucians have always loved a good celebration, and 2 of the most colorful traditions involve flowers and friendly rivalry. The festivals of La Rose and La Marguerite are cultural societies that compete throughout the year, culminating in grand celebrations in August and October. La Rose honoring the English rose, La Marguerite the French marguerite flower. These societies go back over a century, Originally based on mutual aid, members would help each other in times of need, but they've evolved into cultural organizations that preserve music, dance, and traditions. The festivals feature elaborate costumes, traditional dances, call and response singing in Creole, processions through streets decorated with their respective flowers. Members practice for months, perfecting their performances, their songs. It's competition, yes, but the friendly kind, the kind that strengthens community rather than divides it, that keeps traditions alive by making them joyful, by giving people something to belong to take pride in. For those seeking to truly immerse themselves in the island's natural heart, there are trails that wind deep into the interior forest. The Edmund Forest Reserve and trails like the Embers Sort Trail lead hikers through pristine rainforest, where massive trees draped in vines and epiphytes create a cathedral-like canopy overhead. The air is thick with moisture and oxygen, with the scent of growing things and rich earth. Everything is green, 100 shades of green, from the pale new leaves just unfurling to the deep emerald of ancient ferns. Water drips constantly from leaves, streams gurgle unseen in the undergrowth, and if you're quiet and lucky, you might hear the call of a Jacquot echoing through the canopy, or catch the rustle of an agouti moving through the leaf litter. These trails are not easy. They're steep, often muddy, requiring real effort, but they offer something rare. The sense of being completely surrounded by living wilderness, of being small within something vast and old and indifferent to human time. The forest continues its slow, patient growth, trees adding one ring per year, ferns unfurling one frond at a time, while around it, the island lives its life, markets opening at dawn, fishing boats heading out to sea, church bells ringing on Sunday, all of it part of one continuous rhythm, like breathing, like waves, endless and gentle. At the southernmost tip of the island, where Saint Lucia finally surrenders to the sea, there stands a solitary sentinel. The Mole or Kaiku lighthouse rises from a windswept peninsula near View's Fort, perched on a cliff about 730 feet above the crashing waves below. From this vantage point, on clear days, you can see neighboring islands, St. Vincent to the south, the Grenadines scattered across the horizon like stepping stones. The winds here are constant and strong, rushing up from South America across open water, bending the few trees that manage to grow in this exposed place. The lighthouse has guided ships safely past these rocks for decades, its beams sweeping across the darkness night after night, a quiet guardian watching over waters that have claimed more than a few vessels over the centuries. Now it's also a place for those seeking the island's edge, its end point, where you can stand and feel the full power of the trade winds, where the world feels vast and open and endless. Those same strong winds that buffet the lighthouse have created something unexpected. View's Fort has become a haven for kitesurfing, its consistent winds and shallow lagoons providing perfect conditions for riders to skim across the water, colorful kites arcing through the sky like giant birds. What was once just a fishing town and home to the island's main airport has found new life as an adventure sports destination. On any windy afternoon, you can watch the kites dancing, riders launching themselves off waves, hanging in the air for impossible seconds before landing in explosions of spray. It's the island's volcanic geography creating these wind patterns, channeling air between mountains, accelerating it across this southern plain. The fishermen, who've always known these winds, now share their waters with these new sailors of the air. Saint Lucia has not forgotten its painful past, and once each year it pauses to remember and honor those who endured. August 1st is Emancipation Day, marking the anniversary of the abolition of slavery in the British colonies in 1834. It's a day of reflection and celebration, remembering the suffering of those who were enslaved, honoring their resilience and the culture they managed to preserve and pass down despite everything, and celebrating the freedom that eventually came. Church services, cultural performances, traditional music and dance, storytelling. The day acknowledges that Saint Lucia's current culture, its Creole language, its music, its food, its very identity, were forged in part through that crucible of enslavement and resistance. It's a day that says, we remember, we honor, we continue. Speaking of culture passed down through generations, there's a tradition that requires skill, patience, and knowledge handed from elder to apprentice. Traditional cassava bread, made from the cassava root, has been prepared the same way for centuries. A technique that goes back to the island's indigenous inhabitants. The cassava root must be carefully grated, then the poisonous liquid squeezed out using a matutu, a long woven tube that tightens as you twist it. The resulting flour is then spread thin on a large round griddle heated over a fire, slowly toasted until it forms a flat, crispy bread. It's labor-intensive, this process, taking hours to produce just a few rounds of bread. But the women who still make it, and it's almost always women, do so with the same motions their grandmothers used, the same careful attention. You can still find cassava bread at some markets, crispy and slightly sweet, a taste that connects directly to the island's oldest roots, to the Arawaks who first called this place home. Leadership has taken many forms on this island, including historic firsts. Dame Paulette Louise served as Saint Lucia's Governor-General from 1997 to 2017, becoming the first woman to hold this position in the country's history. For 2 decades, she represented the Crown and the Saint Lucian people with grace and dedication, championing education, youth development, and women's rights. Her tenure showed young Saint Lucian girls that any position, any role, was open to them. She came from humble beginnings in the village of Laborie, becoming a teacher and then rising through dedication and service to the highest ceremonial office in the land. It's a very Saint Lucian story, small island, big achievements, proving that size of birthplace has nothing to do with size of impact. Down in the coastal villages, particularly around Anslaray and Canaries, there's a craft that refuses to die out despite the availability of modern fiberglass boats. Traditional wooden boat building continues, passed down through families of craftsmen who shape gomia and mahogany planks into the distinctive fishing boats you see pulled up on every beach. These boats are built by eye and experience rather than plans, the builder knowing from decades of practice exactly how the curves should flow, how thick the planks need to be, where to place the ribs. They're painted in bright colors, blues and greens and yellows, and given names that range from religious, God's will, to playful, sweet talk. A well-built wooden boat can last 20 years or more with proper care, riding out rough seas, bringing home catch after catch. In an age of factory-made everything, there's something deeply satisfying about watching a boat take shape from raw timber, shaped entirely by human hands and inherited knowledge. In those same waters where the wooden boats fish, moving silently through the shallows at night, there lives the island's largest snake. The Saint Lucia boa, known locally as the teat chien, can grow up to 9 feet long and is the island's only native boa constrictor. Despite its size, it's completely harmless to humans, non-venomous and rather shy, preferring to avoid people when possible. These snakes are beautiful in their way, their scales patterned in browns and grays that make them nearly invisible against tree bark. They hunt at night for rats, agoutis, and birds, moving through the trees with surprising grace for their size. Patient predators that can wait motionless for hours. Like the Jacquot parrot, the Pitons is protected, a recognition that every creature, even one that makes some people uncomfortable, has its place in the island's ecosystem, its role in the complex web of life. And throughout all of this, the boats, the snakes, the bread making, the remembering, there's one constant that brings St. Lucians together in passion and pride. Cricket is not just a sport in Saint Lucia. It's a cultural phenomenon, inherited from the British but transformed into something uniquely Caribbean. The Darren Sammy Cricket Ground in Grosse Islet, named after the St. Lucian cricketer who captained the West Indies to 2 World Cup victories, hosts international matches where the crowd's energy rivals any stadium in the world. When the West Indies team plays, life on the island essentially stops. Everyone gathers around televisions and radios, debates rage in rum shops, and if a St. Lucian player scores a century or takes a crucial wicket, the celebration can last for days. Children practice in every open space with whatever they can find. A piece of wood for a bat, a tennis ball, or even a lime if nothing else is available. Cricket here is poetry, drama, national pride, and community gathering all wrapped into one. It's the sound of ball on bat echoing across playing fields at sunset, the roar of crowds, the patient build of an innings, the sudden explosive joy of a wicket falling. The island continues its gentle spin through time, children practicing cricket on beaches where their ancestors fished, women making cassava bread the way it's been made for centuries, boats being built by hand, one plank at a time, all of it held together by memory and love and the simple act of continuing, of passing things down, of saying to the next generation, "Here, this is ours, this is who we are." After a long day under the Caribbean sun, whether you've been fishing, working in the fields, or simply living island life, St. Lucians reach for a drink that bears the image of their most iconic landmark. Piton beer, named after those twin volcanic peaks, is the island's national beer, a light lager perfectly suited to the tropical climate, served ice-cold with condensation dripping down the distinctive green bottle. Brewed locally since 2002, it's become a source of pride, appearing at every beach barbecue, every Friday night jump up, every celebration. The brewery stands near View's Fort, producing bottles and cases that travel from north to south, served in rum shops and restaurants, on fishing boats and at family gatherings. It's refreshment, yes, but also identity, another way of saying this is ours, this is from here. The image of the Pitons on every bottle, a reminder of home in your hand. Near those same Pitons, there's a trail that offers something most visitors never experience. The Tet Paul Nature Trail, managed by the local community, provides accessible hiking with breathtaking views of both Pitons and the surrounding landscape. Unlike the more strenuous climbs, this trail gently guides you through working farmland, breadfruit trees, cocoa plants, cassava patches, showing how agriculture and nature coexist on these volcanic slopes. Local guides, residents of the area who grew up knowing every plant and path, share their knowledge, which leaves make good bush tea for stomach aches, where the best mangoes grow, how to tell when rain is coming by the way clouds gather around Grosse Piton. At the trail's end, a viewing platform offers a panorama that feels almost unreal. The Pitons rising dramatically from the sea, the coastline curving away into blue distance, tiny fishing boats floating like toys far below. It's community-based tourism at its best, local people sharing their home, their knowledge, earning income while preserving what makes their corner of the island special. In coastal towns and villages, you'll notice something interesting being prepared in many households, a thick, gelatinous drink being blended or set to chill. Sea moss, harvested from the coastal waters, is a traditional Caribbean drink and health tonic deeply embedded in Saint Lucian culture. The sea moss, actually a type of algae, is carefully cleaned, boiled with spices like cinnamon and nutmeg, sweetened with condensed milk and vanilla, then blended into a smooth, creamy beverage. It's believed to have numerous health benefits, from boosting immunity to improving digestion, giving energy and vitality. Vendors sell it in rum shops and at roadside stands, poured into plastic cups or bags. Some St. Lucians drink it daily, a habit passed down from grandparents who got it from their grandparents. An unbroken chain of tradition connecting back to African ancestors who brought knowledge of sea plants and their properties across the Middle Passage. Health and heritage in a cup. Scattered across the island's interior, hidden among the newer buildings and modern farms, there are old estate houses that whisper of plantation days. Fond du Plantation, a working cocoa estate near Soufriere, has preserved 19th century colonial architecture alongside its sustainable cocoa farming. The old wooden buildings with their wide verandas, the stone cocoa drying platforms, the boucan, a traditional structure where cocoa beans were dried over slow fires, all remain lovingly maintained. But unlike some plantation tours that sanitize history, Fondue acknowledges the full story. The beauty of the setting alongside the brutal labor system that built it, the architectural heritage alongside the human cost. Visitors can stay in restored cottages, walk through organic cocoa groves, and participate in the tree-to-bar process. The estate has transformed from extraction to sustainability, from exploitation to fair employment, showing that it's possible to honor heritage while refusing to romanticize it. The cocoa trees continue growing as they have for over 2 centuries, but now under very different conditions, producing chocolate that tastes of volcanic soil and second chances. In the gardens, along the roadsides, hovering at every flowering plant, there are tiny jewels that move too fast for the eye to fully capture. Saint Lucia is home to several species of hummingbirds, including the purple-throated carib and the Antillean crested hummingbird, these impossibly small birds that seem more spirit than flesh. Their wings beat up to 80 times per second, creating that distinctive humming sound that gives them their name. They hover motionless in midair, their long beaks perfectly designed to reach nectar deep inside trumpet-shaped flowers. In the right light, their feathers flash with iridescent colors: emerald green, sapphire blue, ruby red, colors that seem painted on by an artist working with light itself. St. Lucians call them doctor birds in some areas, or colibri in Creole. To watch a hummingbird feed is to witness something almost magical. This tiny heart beating 1,000 times per minute. This creature that weighs less than a penny. This impossibly delicate life that somehow thrives in the tropical heat, crossing entire stretches of sea during migration, surviving hurricanes, continuing year after year. They're reminders that strength and beauty come in the smallest packages. In the heart of Castries, there's a square that carries the weight of literary greatness. Derek Walcott Square, named after the Nobel Prize-winning poet, sits in the center of the capital city, a peaceful green space surrounded by historic buildings, anchored by a massive, centuries-old saman tree whose branches spread like a natural cathedral. The square was originally called Columbus Square, but was renamed to honor Walcott, recognizing that a Saint Lucian poet who captured Caribbean life in luminous verse deserved the honor more than a European explorer. Under that saman tree, people rest on benches, vendors sell snacks and drinks, students study, pigeons waddle across the grass. At one end stands the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, its walls painted with murals inside. It's the kind of square every town should have, a place to pause, to sit, to breathe, to be part of the communal life without needing to buy anything or be anywhere. The square breathes in and out with the day's rhythm, quiet at dawn, bustling at lunchtime, peaceful again at dusk. Walk into the hills, into the small villages away from tourist areas, and you'll find knowledge that exists outside of hospitals and pharmacies. Traditional bush medicine remains an important part of Saint Lucian health practices, with older generations passing down knowledge of plants and their healing properties. Fever grass tea for colds and flu, aloe vera for burns and skin conditions, soursop leaves for better sleep, moringa for nutrition and energy. This isn't superstition. Many of these remedies have been validated by modern research, their effectiveness confirmed by science catching up to what grandmothers always knew. In backyards and kitchen gardens, you'll find small pharmacies growing, medicinal plants cultivated and harvested as needed. The knowledge is oral, experimental, learned by watching and doing rather than reading. A woman teaching her daughter how to prepare a poultice, which leaves to pick in the morning versus evening, how much to use, how to brew it properly. This is medicine as relationship, as connection to the land, as another thread in the web of traditional knowledge that makes culture resilient. Before there were cruise ships and tourists, before the airport brought visitors by the thousands, Saint Lucia's connection to the outside world was primarily through banana boats, cargo ships that carried the island's green gold to markets in Britain and North America. In the heyday of banana production from the 1950s through the 1990s, these boats were lifelines. They arrived regularly, loading thousands of boxes of carefully packed bananas while taking on passengers too. Saint Lucians traveling abroad for work, education, or to visit family who'd emigrated. The boats created rhythms everyone knew, departure days when families gathered at the port, arrival days when news and goods from away came home. Many Saint Lucians have memories of these boats, a first journey abroad, saying goodbye to someone who might not return for years, the mixture of excitement and sadness that comes with all departures. Though container ships have largely replaced them, and air travel dominates now, those banana boat days remain vivid in collective memory. A time when the island's fortune literally floated on the sea, when connection to the wider world came slowly, on scheduled crossings, when leaving meant something different than it does now. The island floats on, held by memory and ocean, by traditions of healing and harvest, by birds too small to seem real and trees too large to seem possible, all of it continuing, all of it connected, past flowing into present, present becoming past, gentle, eternal, like breathing, like waves. If you glance at a clock in Saint Lucia, you'll notice it reads the same as clocks in places like New York, Miami, or Halifax at certain times of year. Saint Lucia operates on Atlantic Standard Time year-round, with no daylight saving time adjustments. The sun rises around 6 a.m. and sets around 6 p.m. throughout the year, give or take 30 minutes depending on the season. This consistency comes from being so close to the equator, where day length barely changes across the months. There's no spring forward, fall back here, no confusion about what time it actually is. The rhythm stays constant. Sunrise, midday heat, afternoon rains perhaps, sunset, darkness. Time feels less like something you fight against and more like something you move with, a current you allow to carry you rather than swim against. The island doesn't chase an extra hour of evening light in summer because the evenings are already long and soft and perfect just as they are. Throughout the island's history, one crop rivaled even bananas in importance. Coconuts and copra, dried coconut meat used to produce coconut oil, were once a major export, and coconut palms still line nearly every beach, their fronds rattling in the constant breeze. The tall palms lean at impossible angles, reaching toward the sea, their roots somehow holding them fast despite sandy soil and storms. Coconut water, drunk straight from a freshly cut nut with a machete, is nature's perfect hydration, sterile, mineral-rich, slightly sweet. The husks make excellent charcoal. The leaves thatch roofs and weave into baskets. The meat becomes oil, milk, food. The shells become cups, bowls, utensils. Coconut palms are generous trees, giving and giving, asking only for sand and sun and salt air. In older times, workers would harvest nuts, crack them, dry the meat on large platforms in the sun, producing copra to ship overseas. That industry has faded, but the palms remain, eternal markers of every tropical shore, dropping their heavy fruit with dull thuds that sound like distant drums. In the northeastern town of Dennery, something uniquely Saint Lucian emerged from the intersection of tradition and technology. Dennery segment is a music genre born in Saint Lucia, characterized by fast-paced, rhythmic beats and lyrics delivered in rapid-fire Creole. It evolved from traditional folk music, influenced by soca and dancehall but distinctly its own thing, raw, energetic, often humorous, addressing local life and current events with wit and wordplay. The segment became wildly popular, particularly among young people, spreading from Dennery across the island and beyond. Artists perform at festivals, in rum shops, at impromptu street gatherings, the music pulsing with an energy that makes bodies move almost involuntarily. It's folk music for the digital age, rooted in oral tradition and Creole expression but spread through sound systems, YouTube, and WhatsApp. Culture evolving, adapting, staying alive by transforming while maintaining its essential character. That same town of Dennery celebrates another tradition that brings the whole community together. The Dennery Fish Feast, held during the fishing season, is a massive celebration where tons of fresh fish are prepared using traditional methods and served to crowds that come from across the island. Grilled, fried, stewed, curried, fish prepared in every way imaginable, along with ground provisions, salads, and local drinks. The feast is part celebration, part cultural preservation, part communal meal where everyone, rich and poor, old and young, local and visitor, comes together to eat, to dance, to be part of something larger than themselves. It honors the fishermen whose dangerous work feeds the island, acknowledges the sea's generosity, and reinforces bonds of community through the simple act of sharing food. These kinds of events are the social glue that holds island life together, creating memories and traditions that children will carry forward, that will be talked about and anticipated year after year. Saint Lucia's education system, like so much else, bears the mark of British influence. The school system follows the British model, with students taking Caribbean examinations council exams equivalent to British O-levels and A-levels, preparing them for universities across the Caribbean, in Britain, North America, and beyond. Education is highly valued. You'll see children in neat uniforms walking to school early each morning, textbooks under arms, taking their studies seriously because families sacrifice to give them opportunities. Schools often sit in beautiful locations. A classroom window might frame a view of the sea or mountains. Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, named after that Nobel laureate in economics, provides higher education, producing teachers, nurses, administrators, the professionals who keep the island running. There's an understanding here that education is the pathway to opportunity, to seeing the world beyond this small island, to returning home equipped to make it better. Schools close for Independence Day, for Carnival, for important cricket matches, acknowledging that education includes culture, celebration, identity, not just books and exams. In the waters all around the island, protected from overfishing by law and tradition, there swims a creature that has existed largely unchanged for millions of years. Sea turtles, including hawksbill, green, leatherback, and loggerhead species, nest on Saint Lucian beaches, returning to the same shores where they themselves hatched decades earlier. During nesting season, usually March through October, female turtles emerge from the waves at night, laboriously dragging themselves up the beach, digging deep nests with their rear flippers, laying dozens of soft-shelled eggs, then covering them carefully before returning to the sea. Conservation groups monitor beaches, protect nests from predators, and sometimes relocate eggs to safer locations. Weeks later, tiny hatchlings emerge, no bigger than a cookie, and instinctively scramble toward the brightest horizon, which should be the moonlit sea. Volunteers help guide them safely past lights that might confuse them, watching as these ancient mariners begin their improbable journey, most not surviving but some living for 50, 70, even 100 years, crossing entire oceans, navigating by magnetic fields and who knows what other senses, eventually returning here, to this same sand, to continue the cycle. Rum, that Caribbean spirit distilled from sugarcane, has deep roots throughout the islands. While Saint Lucia doesn't have the massive rum distilleries of some neighbors, it produces Chairman's Reserve Rum, a premium brand respected throughout the Caribbean and beyond. The rum is distilled and aged at Rosso Distillery near Marigot Bay, using both column and pot stills to create different flavor profiles, then aged in oak barrels in the tropical heat, which accelerates maturation. The result is smooth, complex rum, some bottled clear, some aged to amber or dark mahogany, each with notes of vanilla, caramel, spice, and that indefinable something that comes from this particular place, this volcanic soil, this Caribbean sun. Rum shops across the island serve it neat, on ice or mixed, but always it's a social drink, shared among friends, sipped while dominoes clack on tables, while stories are told, while the day winds down into evening. It's celebration and relaxation, heritage and economy, sugarcane transformed into something that warms from within. Walking along any beach, you might notice something unexpected among the usual shells and driftwood. Sea glass, fragments of broken bottles and glass worn smooth by decades of tumbling in surf and sand, accumulates on certain beaches, each piece a tiny, frosted jewel in green, brown, clear, and occasionally rare colors like blue or red. These are accidents transformed by time and patience into beauty, discarded glass, pollution really, that the ocean has slowly, grain by grain, buffed into something people collect and treasure. It's a metaphor for the island itself in some ways, taking what history brought, including the difficult and broken pieces, and slowly, through time and persistence, transforming it into something uniquely beautiful. Children collect sea glass, examining each piece against the light. Artists incorporate it into jewelry and mosaics. Each fragment carries within it a story, a bottle that once held rum or beer or medicine, tossed away or lost decades ago, now returned by the sea as a gift, its sharp edges gone, made gentle by endless motion, by salt water and sand, by time. The waves continue their work, tumbling, smoothing, transforming, while the island rests under its blanket of stars. Coconut palms rustling, sea turtles swimming in dark waters, the education of the young continuing, music playing somewhere in the distance, all of it part of the endless cycle, the eternal return, like breathing, like tides. In gardens and along roadways, climbing up poles and cascading over fences, there blooms a plant whose flowers look almost too vibrant to be real. The heliconia, with its brilliant red and yellow bracts shaped like lobster claws, was adopted as one of Saint Lucia's national flowers, though locals often still associate the rose and marguerite with those cultural societies we spoke of earlier. The heliconia seems perfectly designed for hummingbirds, its tubular flowers filled with nectar, its colors announcing itself from a distance. These tropical blooms last for weeks, their waxy petals resisting wilting even in the intense heat. They grow almost effortlessly in this climate, needing little more than rain and sun to produce their spectacular display. Gardens overflow with them, and even in the wild, hiking through the forest, you'll suddenly come upon a stand of heliconias glowing like flames in the green shadows. Proof that beauty doesn't have to be delicate or rare. Sometimes it grows abundantly, generously, everywhere you look. Throughout the island, particularly in older villages and rural areas, you can still see houses built in the traditional Creole style, structures that evolved over centuries to suit this exact climate. Traditional Saint Lucian Creole houses are built on stilts with wooden jalousie shutters, steep gabled roofs, and wide verandas, every element serving a purpose. The stilts lift the house above flood waters during heavy rains and allow cooling air to circulate underneath. The jalousies can be adjusted to control airflow while providing shade and privacy, each wooden slat angled just so. The steep roof sheds tropical downpours efficiently and creates a high ceiling inside that traps hot air above the living space. And that veranda, the gallery, as it's called, becomes an outdoor living room where families gather in the evening, where neighbors stop to chat, where you can sit and watch rain sweep across the valley while staying perfectly dry. These houses breathe with the climate rather than fighting against it, built from knowledge accumulated over generations of living in this exact place, under this exact sun, through these exact storms. They're painted in cheerful colors, turquoise and coral and yellow, like flowers themselves, brightening the hillsides, turning practical shelter into joy. Along the coast, where rivers meet the sea and fresh water mixes with salt, there exists an ecosystem that seems caught between two worlds. Saint Lucia's mangrove forests, particularly in areas like the Savannah's Bay Nature Reserve, provide crucial habitat for juvenile fish, crabs, and countless other species. The mangrove trees themselves are marvels. They grow in salt water, which would kill most plants, filtering the salt through their roots. Their aerial roots arch down into the water like Gothic buttresses, creating a maze that protects small fish from larger predators. At low tide, you can see these root systems exposed, covered in oysters and barnacles, while crabs scuttle across the mud. At high tide, the forest becomes an aquatic labyrinth. Mangroves are nurseries, protective barriers against storm surge, water filters, and carbon sinks, doing so many essential jobs quietly, without fanfare. They smell of salt and mud and life, ancient and fundamental. The water here moves slowly, thick with sediment and nutrients, dark and mysterious. Birds nest in the canopy above, herons, egrets, kingfishers, fishing the waters below. Everything interconnected, everything dependent on these trees that learned to thrive where land and sea blur together. When Saint Lucians make music, they don't always need expensive instruments imported from overseas. Traditional instruments like the shak-shak, a percussion instrument made from dried gourds filled with seeds, and the boha, a scraping instrument, appear in folk music performances alongside homemade drums, banjos, and the distinctive sound of the quattro, a small four-stringed guitar. These instruments were born of necessity and creativity. Enslaved people denied proper instruments created their own, using materials at hand, carrying forward African rhythms and European melodies on tools they built themselves. The shak-shak's rhythm is hypnotic, insistent, shika-shika-shika, providing the heartbeat for quadrille dances and traditional folk songs. Even today, at cultural performances and in villages during festivals, you'll hear these instruments, their sounds carrying memory, connecting present to past through rhythm and vibration. Music as resistance, as preservation, as the refusal to be silenced even when everything else was taken away. In nearly every backyard, in vacant lots, along roadsides, you'll find a tree that helped save lives during times of scarcity. Breadfruit, introduced to the Caribbean from the Pacific in the 18th century, became a staple food source, the large, starchy fruits able to feed families when other food was scarce. A mature breadfruit tree produces hundreds of fruits each year, each one large enough to feed several people. The fruit can be boiled, roasted, fried, or ground into flour, versatile and filling. Roasted breadfruit, its skin charred black over coals, its flesh creamy and slightly sweet, appears at almost every traditional meal. The tree itself is beautiful, huge spreading branches, enormous leaves that provide deep shade, green fruits hanging like organic ornaments. Captain Bligh was bringing breadfruit to feed enslaved workers when his crew mutinied on the Bounty. That's how important this crop was considered. The irony isn't lost on Saint Lucians. A tree brought to sustain slavery became a gift that outlasted it, feeding free people, its roots going deep into Caribbean soil, belonging here now as much as anywhere. After dark, when children should be sleeping but are begging for one more story, grandparents sometimes tell tales that make even brave children pull their blankets close. Saint Lucian folklore is rich with characters like Papa Boys, the protector of the forest, and La Diablesse, a beautiful woman who leads travelers astray with one human foot and one cow's hoof. These stories, blending African, French, and Caribbean traditions, teach lessons and preserve cautionary wisdom. Papa Boys appears as an old man covered in leaves and moss, watching over animals, punishing hunters who take more than they need. La Diablesse wears a beautiful dress and a wide-brimmed hat. Her face hidden, she beckons from the roadside, and foolish men who follow her end up lost in the forest, sometimes never found. There's the Lougarou, a shapeshifter who sheds her skin at night and flies as a ball of fire. These aren't just stories, they're the island's collective imagination made manifest. Warnings to respect the forest, to be faithful, to come home before dark, to understand that not everything is as it seems. Children who hear these tales grow up with a healthy respect for the unknown, an understanding that the world holds mysteries, that caution and wisdom matter. During Carnival, among the elaborate sequined costumes and modern masqueraders, You'll see figures that tower above the crowd on impossibly tall stilts. The Moko Jumbi, a traditional carnival character that walks on stilts up to 15 feet high, represents a spirit that protects villages and drives away evil. The tradition comes from West Africa, brought by enslaved people and adapted to Caribbean carnival. Watching a Moko Jumbi is mesmerizing. These dancers move with surprising grace despite their height, sometimes dancing, even limboing while perched on their stilts. They wear colorful pants, flowing shirts, elaborate headpieces. Learning to walk on stilts that tall takes years of practice, usually starting young, building the balance and courage gradually. It's both performance and spiritual tradition, entertainment and protection, another thread in the complex weaving of African and Caribbean culture. When a Moko Jumbi dances past, you can't help but look up in awe, watching someone who has literally elevated themselves above the ordinary world, defying gravity through skill and determination. There's a place where you can stand and see both sides of the island at once, where the Atlantic and Caribbean seem within reach of each hand. The Bar de El Isle Trail runs along the central ridge that forms the island's spine, cutting through pristine rainforest at elevations where the air feels cooler, cleaner, different from the coastal heat. The trail isn't long, just a few miles, but it takes you through primary forest where massive trees draped in vines and epiphytes create a canopy so thick that little light reaches the forest floor. The silence here is different, not empty but full, the silence of 1,000 small sounds blending together into something that feels like quiet. And then you reach the viewing points, and suddenly the world opens up. On one side, the wild Atlantic coast. On the other, the calmer Caribbean shore. You can see the island's geography laid out like a map. The way the mountains run north to south. How rivers have carved valleys radiating toward the coast. How human settlements cluster where the land allows. Up here, you understand why this small island contains such variety. The mountains create microclimates, rain shadows, different worlds on different sides of the same ridge. It's perspective and revelation, the island explaining itself. On a map of the Caribbean, if you trace your finger down from the larger islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, Jamaica, you'll eventually reach a chain of smaller islands that arc southward like scattered jewels. Saint Lucia is part of the Windward Islands, so named because they sit in the path of the prevailing trade winds that blow steadily from the northeast. These islands, Dominica to the north, Saint Lucia in the middle, Saint Vincent to the south, share similar volcanic origins, similar climates, similar stories of colonization and independence. The name Windward distinguishes them from their neighbors to the west, the Leeward Islands, which sit more sheltered from those constant winds. But here, the wind is always present, bending the palm trees, filling sails, cooling the air, carrying the scent of salt and rain. It's the wind that shaped life here, that powered the ships that arrived for centuries, that continues to whisper through the valleys and across the ridges, eternal and patient. Down on the beaches, particularly at Anslare and other fishing villages, you can still witness a technique that requires the entire community to participate. Seine fishing, or beach seine fishing, involves pulling a large net to shore by hand, with dozens of people, men, women, even children, grabbing the thick ropes and walking backward up the beach, hauling in whatever the net has captured. It's ancient, communal work, no motors, no machinery, just human strength and cooperation. Someone spots a school of fish offshore. The canoe goes out to set the net in a wide arc, and then everyone available comes to help pull. The chanting starts, rhythmic calls that coordinate the effort. Heave, rest, everyone moving together. As the net approaches shore, excitement builds. What will it hold? Sometimes the catch is abundant, silvery fish flashing in the mesh. Sometimes it's meager. Either way, the catch is shared according to tradition. The boat owner gets a portion. Those who pulled get shares. Some fish go to elders who can no longer work. It's fishing as community bond, as shared risk and shared reward, the way it's been done for centuries. Each generation teaching the next when to pull, how to divide fairly. In kitchens across the island, particularly in more traditional households, there's a cooking tool that predates ovens and stovetops. The coal pot, a small, portable charcoal stove made from clay or metal, remains a cherished cooking method for preparing certain dishes that just taste better when cooked over real coals. The coal pot sits on the ground or a low table, its bowl filled with charcoal that's lit and fanned until it glows with steady heat. A pot or skillet sits on top, and cooking happens slowly, with the steady, even heat that only charcoal provides. Older women will tell you that pilau cooked on a coal pot tastes different, better, than anything cooked on a gas stove. The smoke, the time, the attention required, something in that process adds flavor that can't be replicated. During power outages, which happens sometimes when storms pass through, the coal pot becomes essential rather than nostalgic. Cooking continues, families are fed, life goes on. It's resilience disguised as tradition, or perhaps tradition born from resilience. Growing wild in certain parts of the island, particularly along hillsides and in abandoned estates, there's a tree whose leaves hold aromatic magic. Bay leaves from the West Indian bay tree are harvested to produce bay rum, a traditional cologne and aftershave that's been made in the Caribbean for over a century. The leaves are distilled with rum and spices, the process filling the air with a scent that's somehow both sharp and warm, masculine and comforting. Men dab it on after shaving, the alcohol stinging slightly, the bay oil soothing. It's used as a body splash, a scalp treatment, even a home remedy for aches and pains. Bay rum rubbed on sore muscles, the warmth of the alcohol carrying the oils deep. Bottles of bay rum sit in barbershops and bathrooms throughout the island. That distinctive green glass, that familiar scent that smells like grandfathers, like Sunday mornings, like tradition. Small-scale producers still make it, keeping the art alive, bottles sold at markets and shops, each one carrying the essence of these volcanic hills distilled into liquid memory. Off the northeastern coast, visible from the mainland on clear days, there sits a small island that serves as sanctuary for seabirds. Frigate Island Nature Reserve is home to one of the region's largest colonies of magnificent frigate birds. Those large, prehistoric-looking birds with forked tails and wingspans that can reach 7 feet. The male frigate birds are particularly striking during breeding season when they inflate their bright red throat pouches like balloons to attract mates. A display so unusual it seems more like a cartoon than real life. These birds are masters of the air, able to soar for hours without flapping, riding air currents with such efficiency that they sometimes sleep while flying. They nest on Frigate Island by the thousands, the shrubs and low trees covered with nests, the air filled with their calls. The island is protected, access restricted, allowing these ancient mariners to raise their young in relative peace, just as they've done for countless generations, while the world changes around them. On the eastern, Atlantic side of the island, where the coastline is more rugged and the winds blow stronger, there exists an ecosystem quite different from the lush rainforests of the interior. Saint Lucia's dry forest, particularly around the Point Sable Environmental Protection Area, represents a threatened ecosystem where plants have adapted to survive with less rainfall, stronger winds, and salt spray. The trees here are shorter, their leaves smaller and tougher, designed to conserve water. Cacti appear alongside tropical species, creating unusual combinations. The dry forest once covered much more of the island, but development and agriculture have reduced it to small remnants. What remains is precious, home to specialized plants found nowhere else, to lizards and birds adapted to these specific conditions. Walking through dry forest feels different from rainforest, more open, more light reaching the ground, the sense of struggle more apparent in the twisted, wind-shaped trees. It's a reminder that not all of Saint Lucia is lush and green, that the island contains multitudes, that adaptation takes many forms. Long before bananas dominated the hillsides, another crop shaped the island's economy and left scars on the land and society. Sugarcane was a major crop during the colonial period, with estates and mills scattered across the island, the production of sugar and rum driving the plantation economy that depended on enslaved labor. The ruins of sugar mills still stand in various locations: stone windmills that once crushed cane, aqueducts that carried water to turn mill wheels, the foundations of boiling houses where cane juice was transformed into sugar crystals. These ruins are haunted places, beautiful in their decay but heavy with history. The wealth they generated flowed elsewhere, to Europe, while the people who did the brutal work of cutting cane, feeding the mills, tending the boiling cauldrons, received nothing but suffering. Today, some cane is still grown, mostly for local rum production. But the great estates are gone, broken up, returned to forest or converted to other uses. The land remembers, though, the terraces cut into hillsides, the old estate roads, the place names that reference sugar and plantations. History written in landscape, read by those who know how to look. In several coastal villages, something wonderful has emerged from necessity and creativity. Community-based tourism initiatives, particularly in Insomnia, have allowed villagers to share their culture while earning income in ways that preserve rather than destroy what makes their communities special. The Insomnia fish fry happens every Friday night. The village street closes to traffic. Fish is grilled fresh from that day's catch. Tables appear, music plays, and visitors come to experience authentic village life rather than manufactured tourist attractions. Local guides offer cultural tours, teaching visitors about fishing traditions, taking them to family farms, showing them how cassava bread is made or how to cook traditional dishes. It's tourism that benefits the community directly rather than flowing to foreign-owned resorts, that treats culture as living practice rather than museum piece, that says, "Come, be part of our life for an evening rather than watch us perform our culture for you." It's organic, genuine, imperfect in the best ways. Sometimes the fish runs out. Sometimes the music is too loud or not loud enough. But it's real, and that's what makes it special. People helping people, culture sustaining itself economically, tradition finding new life. And so the island continues to evolve, to adapt, to find ways forward that honor what came before. The wind still blowing, the fish still swimming, the coal pot still glowing in the evening, old methods and new ideas existing side by side, all of it part of the same continuous story, the same patient unfolding, like dawn, like dusk, like the eternal return of waves to shore. When you step into the warm Caribbean waters around Saint Lucia, you're entering what scientists call a biodiversity hotspot. The waters surrounding Saint Lucia are home to over 160 species of fish and 60 species of coral, creating underwater gardens of remarkable complexity and beauty. Sergeant majors with their bold black stripes patrol the shallows. Parrotfish, their scales shimmering in blues and greens, scrape algae from coral with their beak-like mouths, that scraping sound audible to snorkelers floating above. Spotted eagle rays glide past like underwater birds, their wings undulating gracefully. And deeper down, where recreational divers venture, larger creatures appear: reef sharks, barracuda, the occasional nurse shark resting in a cave. Each coral formation is its own small city, home to countless tiny fish seeking shelter, shrimp and crabs hiding in crevices, anemones waving their tentacles in the current. The water here is warm enough to support this abundance, averaging around 80 degrees Fahrenheit, creating conditions where life doesn't just survive but flourishes extravagantly. That volcanic soil that grows bananas and cocoa so well has another gift to offer. Saint Lucia produces exceptional hot peppers, including the famously fiery Scotch bonnet, that small, lantern-shaped pepper that packs extraordinary heat alongside a distinct fruity flavor. You'll find them in every market, piled in colorful mounds, yellow, orange, red, their innocent appearance belying their power. Saint Lucian cuisine uses these peppers liberally, in pepper sauces that grace every table, in marinades for jerk chicken and fish, in stews and rice dishes. Making pepper sauce is an art. The peppers combined with vinegar, garlic, onions, sometimes mustard or fruits, each family having their own recipe passed down and adjusted, debates raging over whose grandmother made it best. The heat isn't just heat, it's flavor. It's preservation in the days before refrigeration. It's medicine. Pepper sauce clears sinuses like nothing else. It's identity. A meal without pepper sauce feels incomplete to many St. Lucians, like food missing its essential spark. In the town of Jacquot, on the eastern coast where the Atlantic crashes against rocky shores, there exists a tradition that draws people together in shared labor and celebration. The Jacquot La Rose Festival features traditional practices including the kubui, a work bee where community members gather to help build or repair someone's house, singing work songs, the rhythm helping coordinate their efforts. It's the same principle as seine fishing, communal work making heavy tasks lighter, turning necessity into social event. The songs are call and response, one person leading, everyone else answering, the melody ancient. The words sometimes improvised to comment on the work, on current events, on anything really. After the work comes feasting. The person whose house was built provides food and drink, everyone exhausted but satisfied, the house standing as proof of what community can accomplish together. These traditions persist because they work, because they create bonds stronger than any individual effort could, because they remind people that alone we struggle, but together we can build anything. Along the southern coast, in Vieux Fort and surrounding areas, the landscape flattens out into something rare for this mountainous island. The Jacquot mangrove wetlands and surrounding flatlands near Vieux Fort represent the largest area of flat terrain on the island, making it ideal for the international airport that serves as St. Lucia's main gateway. But this flatland has other value too. The wetlands are protected as a nature reserve, their brackish waters and mangrove channels home to tarpon, snook, and countless juvenile fish species. It's one of the few places on the island where you can see horizon to horizon without mountains interrupting the view, where the sky feels bigger, where weather systems approach visibly from miles away. The contrast with the rest of the island is striking. No steep green peaks here, just wide open spaces, grasslands, marshes, the feeling of being somewhere else entirely while still on the same small island. It reminds you that even in 238 square miles, there's room for dramatic variety. Among the forest creatures we've met, the parrots, the snakes, the lizards, there's a small mammal that plays an important ecological role. The agouti, a rodent about the size of a rabbit with golden brown fur, is one of Saint Lucia's few native land mammals and one of the most important seed dispersers in the forest. Agoutis eat fallen fruits and nuts, often burying some for later, and when they forget where they buried them, which happens often, those seeds sprout into new trees. They're essentially little gardeners, replanting the forest one forgotten seed cache at a time. They're shy creatures, most active at dawn and dusk, their golden fur blending into the forest floor's dappled light. If you're hiking quietly, you might hear one before you see it. The rustle of leaves, a sudden dash for cover. They're part of the forest's ancient economy, a relationship between animal and tree that's existed for millions of years, each depending on the other, neither able to thrive alone. When celebrating special occasions, weddings, anniversaries, important festivals, Saint Lucians turn to a dessert that requires patience and care to prepare properly. Sweetbread, a dense, spiced fruit cake containing raisins, currants, cherries, and sometimes rum, is the traditional celebration cake, often taking days to prepare and bake. It's not bread at all despite the name. It's closer to Christmas pudding, rich and dark and satisfying. Women bake these cakes for weddings especially, the preparation itself a ritual, soaking the fruits in rum weeks in advance, creaming butter and sugar until light, adding eggs one at a time, folding in flour mixed with nutmeg, cinnamon, vanilla. The house fills with that distinctive scent, spice and caramelizing sugar and baking fruit. The finished cake is dense enough to slice thin, rich enough that a small piece satisfies. Wrapped properly, it can last for months, the flavors actually improving with age. It's a cake that requires commitment. You can't decide to make it on a whim, and maybe that's fitting for the occasions it marks. Those moments important enough to deserve time, attention, care. Throughout the island's history, one location has served as a gathering point, a defensive position, and now a connection to the wider world. The natural harbor at Castries is one of the finest deep-water ports in the Caribbean, carved by volcanic activity and erosion into a nearly perfect shelter. Ships have sought refuge here for centuries. Spanish galleons, French frigates, British men-of-war, merchant vessels carrying goods and people, and now cruise ships bringing thousands of visitors. The harbor can accommodate the largest vessels, protected from most weather, its deep water allowing approach even at low tide. This geographic advantage made Castries inevitable as the capital. Ports determined settlement patterns, controlled trade, became the places where news arrived and history happened. Today, when cruise ships dock, the city transforms temporarily, vendors appear, taxis line up, tours depart, then returns to itself after they leave, locals reclaiming their space, the harbor returning to its quieter routines of fishing boats and cargo ships, the eternal rhythm of arrival and departure. As evening settles across the island each day, as the sun drops toward the Caribbean horizon painting everything in shades of orange and gold, there's a moment that happens quietly in households across Saint Lucia. The tradition of evening prayer remains strong, particularly in rural communities and among older generations, families gathering after dinner, children fidgeting but present, Someone leading a prayer that gives thanks for the day, asks protection through the night, mentions specific concerns, someone's illness, a fisherman at sea, a student taking exams. It's informal, intimate, different from church services. This is family talking to God in their own way, mixing English and Creole, formal prayers and spontaneous thoughts. After the prayer, maybe someone reads a Bible passage, or there's a moment of silence, and then the evening continues. Children released to play, adults settling in to talk or watch television or simply sit on the gallery watching darkness gather in the valley. It's a pause, a reminder to be grateful, a way of marking time. Another day safely ended, another night beginning, the eternal cycle continuing. The island breathes out, releasing the day, preparing for night, lights appearing one by one in villages scattered across the hills. The sound of tree frogs beginning their evening chorus, thousands of them calling, creating a symphony of small voices. The day creatures resting, the night ones stirring, everything in its time, everything in its place, the rhythm continuing, unbroken, eternal, like sleep, like dreams, like peace itself. If you were to look up and see Saint Lucia's flag flying in the breeze, and you'll see it everywhere, from government buildings to fishing boats to school yards, you'd notice something striking in its design. The flag features a blue field representing the tropical sky and surrounding seas, with a golden triangle overlapping a larger black triangle edged in white, representing the Pitons rising from the earth. The symbolism is layered and thoughtful. The gold for sunshine and prosperity, the black for the African heritage and rich volcanic soil, the white for cultural unity and the beach sand. Two triangles, two Pitons, those eternal volcanic sentinels that define the island's silhouette. The flag was adopted at independence in 1979, designed to tell the island's story in fabric and color, where they come from, what defines them, what they aspire to be. Every schoolchild learns what the colors mean, carries that knowledge through life, a reminder of identity woven into the daily landscape. From those Pitons and the volcanic peaks around them, something precious flows constantly downward toward the sea. Saint Lucia has numerous rivers and streams fed by the abundant rainfall in the mountains, with the Roseau River being one of the largest, winding through valleys and forests before reaching the Caribbean near Marigot Bay. These rivers are the island's arteries, carrying fresh water, carving valleys, creating pools where people have bathed for generations. In the dry season, they run clear and lower, revealing smooth stones in their beds. In the rainy season, they swell and rush, sometimes overflowing their banks, carrying silt and vegetation toward the sea. Women still wash clothes at certain riverside spots, beating fabric against smooth rocks, the traditional way, though fewer do it now than before. Children swim in river pools, the water cool and fresh, so different from the warm sea. The rivers connect mountain to coast, forest to ocean, constantly moving, constantly renewing, part of the island's circulatory system. On certain weekends throughout the year, particularly during festival seasons, you'll see crowds gathering along the coast for a competition that stirs passionate loyalty. Traditional boat racing, with teams from different villages competing in wooden fishing boats, is a beloved sport that combines skill, tradition, and intense rivalry. The boats are the same ones used for fishing, wooden vessels built by hand, but stripped down for racing, their crews working in perfect synchronization. The races follow the coastline, boats tacking against the wind, crews leaning out to balance, sails straining. Each village has its colors, its supporters, its pride at stake. People line the shore shouting encouragement, rum shops fill with spectators, bets are placed, and when their boat wins, the celebration lasts well into the night. When it loses, there are already excuses prepared and promises of victory next time. It's sport rooted in practical skill. These are working boats, these are fishermen racing, but elevated to cultural event, to friendly warfare, to identity. Saint Lucia doesn't exist in isolation, despite being surrounded by sea. The island is an active member of regional organizations including the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, OECS, and the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, recognizing that small island nations share challenges and opportunities that require cooperation. These organizations coordinate on everything from disaster response to education standards to economic policy. When hurricanes threaten, aid flows between islands. When one island develops a successful program, others learn from it. There's a regional university system, a regional court, shared currencies, and coordinated approaches to international negotiations. It's pragmatic cooperation born from necessity. Alone, each island is small and vulnerable. Together, they have voice and strength. Saint Lucians work throughout the Caribbean. Caribbean nationals work in Saint Lucia, creating networks of connection stronger than any single nation could build alone. The sea connects rather than divides. Walk through any village at midday, when the sun is high and hot, and you'll notice something about how people interact. There's a culture of greeting, of acknowledgement, a refusal to pass someone without recognition, a nod, a good morning or good afternoon, a brief exchange even with strangers. It would be considered rude, almost aggressive, to walk past someone without acknowledgement. This courtesy extends to sharing. If you're eating and someone approaches, you offer them some, even if you don't have much, even if you hope they'll decline. The offer itself matters, the gesture of inclusion. When someone helps you, the response is thank you followed by God bless, gratitude extending beyond the human into the spiritual. These small courtesies, repeated thousands of times daily across the island, create a social fabric of mutual regard, a sense that we're all in this together, that recognition and respect cost nothing but mean everything. It's how small communities survive, how isolation becomes connection, how strangers become neighbors. In the weeks leading up to Carnival, if you know where to look, you'll find workshops bustling with creative energy and the smell of glue and paint. Mars camps, where carnival costume bands design and construct their elaborate costumes, become hives of activity, with designers sketching concepts, craftspeople cutting and shaping materials, seamstresses working late into the night. The costumes are spectacular, towering headpieces covered in feathers and jewels, backpacks with enormous wire frames supporting wings or elaborate designs, beaded bodices that catch the light, everything designed to transform the wearer into a bird of paradise, an angel, a fantasy creature. The work is painstaking. Each costume might take hundreds of hours to complete, all for those 2 days of Mars, those 2 days of playing in the streets. But those 2 days justify everything, when all that work comes alive in motion and music and joy. The Mars camps are where vision becomes reality, where community comes together in creative purpose, where art serves celebration, where beauty is made by hand for no reason except that carnival demands it. Throughout the island, particularly at festivals and celebrations, there's a sound that embodies Caribbean joy more than almost any other. Steel pan music, those instruments created from oil drums and tuned to produce crystalline melodic notes, fills the air during celebrations. The bright, ringing tones instantly recognizable, instantly transporting. The steel pan was invented in Trinidad but adopted throughout the Caribbean, including Saint Lucia, where steel bands practice in communities, young people learning the art, keeping it alive. The sound is joyful, complex, these repurposed oil drums producing music of surprising sophistication, able to play everything from calypso to classical, from reggae to jazz. A steel band in full performance is mesmerizing. The panist's hands moving in blurs, mallets striking drums in intricate patterns, rhythm section driving everything forward. The sound resonates not just in the ears but in the chest, in the bones, making it almost impossible not to move, not to smile, not to feel that particular Caribbean joy rising up. The volcanic mountains that define Saint Lucia's landscape do more than just provide dramatic scenery. The central mountain range creates distinct microclimates across the island, with the windward east coast receiving significantly more rainfall than the leeward west coast, sometimes differing by as much as 100 inches of annual rainfall. The trade winds blow moisture from the Atlantic, which rises when it hits the mountains, cools, and falls as rain on the eastern slopes and peaks. Constant, nourishing rain that keeps the rainforest green and the rivers flowing. By the time the air descends the western slopes toward the Caribbean, much of that moisture is gone, creating drier conditions. This is why the East Coast is lush and wild, while parts of the West Coast are more arid, why certain crops grow better on one side than the other. The mountains orchestrate the weather, conducting rainfall like a symphony, ensuring that the island has both rainforest and dry forest, both rushing streams and calm, dry beaches. Everything connected, everything balanced by volcanic stone and persistent wind and the patient mathematics of weather. The island settles into its rhythms, steel pans echoing from a practice somewhere in the hills, rivers running their eternal courses, greetings exchanged on village paths, costumes taking shape in dim workshops, the flag rippling in the trade wind, all of it continuing, all of it part of the endless cycle, day becoming night, night becoming day, the island breathing, the island dreaming, holding everything, everyone, past and present, in its volcanic heart. Rest in these rhythms, let them carry you, like wind, like water, like the patient turning of the earth. The island knows the way, has always known. Trust it. Trust the gentle dark, the soft silence. Sleep now, deeply, completely. You are safe. You are held. You are home. As we come toward the end of our journey through Saint Lucia tonight, there are a few more gentle truths to share about this remarkable island. In the warm, shallow waters around Saint Lucia's coastline, particularly in the seagrass beds and mangrove areas, there lives a creature so gentle, so improbable, that seeing one feels like a blessing. The Caribbean manatee, though rare visitors to Saint Lucia, occasionally appears in these protected coastal waters, drifting slowly through the shallows, grazing on seagrass with peaceful dedication. These enormous, gentle mammals, sometimes called sea cows, can weigh over 1,000 pounds yet move with surprising grace through the water. They surface to breathe, their whiskered faces briefly breaking the surface before descending again to their underwater gardens. They have no natural predators, no aggression, just an almost meditative existence of eating and floating and breathing. When St. Lucians spot one, word spreads quickly. There's a manatee in the bay, and people come to watch respectfully, maintaining distance, honoring the rare privilege of witnessing such gentleness, such peaceful existence. That connection between land and sea, between what grows in the volcanic soil and what's harvested from the ocean, comes together perfectly in one beloved preparation. Akra, small fritters made from salted cod mixed with flour, herbs, and peppers, then deep-fried until golden, are a favorite street food and party snack. Crispy on the outside, fluffy within, salty and savory and slightly spicy all at once. They're sold at beach bars, at street corners, at every celebration, eaten hot from the fryer, sometimes with a squeeze of lime or a dab of pepper sauce. The recipe came from Africa, adapted to Caribbean ingredients, the salted cod replacing whatever fish was available there, the local peppers and herbs making it distinctly Saint Lucian. Making Akra is an art. The batter must be the right consistency, the oil the right temperature, the timing perfect. But when done well, they're irresistible, people eating one after another, burning their fingers slightly because they can't wait for them to cool. Food as comfort, as tradition, as the taste of home. Among all the practical reasons to love Saint Lucia, its beauty, its culture, its warmth, there's something less tangible but perhaps more important. Saint Lucia consistently ranks among the happiest countries in the Caribbean in various quality of life indices. And while statistics can't capture everything, there's truth in them. Walk through villages, talk to people, and you feel it. A sense of contentment, of being where they belong, of having enough. Not wealth necessarily, but richness of a different kind. Family nearby, community strong, beauty all around, fish in the sea, fruit on the trees, sunshine and rain in their seasons. Problems exist, of course, economic challenges, youth unemployment, the complications of small island life. But underneath runs a current of gratitude, of appreciation for what they have, a refusal to define success by external standards. The island teaches a kind of wisdom, that bigger isn't always better, that small can be complete, that a good life doesn't require more than this: connection, beauty, meaning, home. And finally, perhaps the most important truth about Saint Lucia, the one that underlies everything else we've explored tonight. Saint Lucia remains a living culture, not a museum, not a resort, but a real place where real people live real lives, complicated, joyful, difficult, ordinary, and extraordinary all at once. The fishermen still go out before dawn. Children still walk to school. Women still make cassava bread using ancient methods. Young people still create new music from old roots. The Pitons still rise into morning mist. The trade winds still blow. Life continues in its rhythms, adapting when necessary, preserving what matters, moving forward while honoring the past. This isn't a place frozen in time for visitors to observe. It's a place fully alive, fully itself, with all the messy beauty that real life entails. The island doesn't perform its culture, it lives it. And that's what makes it worth knowing, worth honoring, worth carrying with you into sleep and dreams. And so our journey through Saint Lucia comes to a gentle close. 100 whispers of this island's story, woven together like those trade winds weaving through palm fronds, like waves weaving patterns on sand, like all the voices and all the generations weaving themselves into one continuous song. The island continues without us now, breathing in and out, the eternal rhythm. Sun and rain, mountain and sea, memory and moment, all held together in volcanic stone and warm water, in green hills and blue horizons, in the patient turning of days into nights into days again. Let yourself dissolve into that rhythm. Let the island hold you as you sleep, as it holds everything, gently, completely, eternally. Thank you for journeying with us tonight on the Sleepy Island channel. May Saint Lucia's peace carry you into dreams, and may you wake, whenever you wake, feeling as if you've returned from somewhere beautiful. Good night, sleep well. The island will still be here, tomorrow, and always waiting, peaceful, home.